The key point, the important point being that a deflation is more destructive than an inflation in terms of its impact on the economy, because in a deflationary environment, and across the board deflation, okay, businesses are ultimately not able to take in enough revenue anymore to support their employee base. So employment goes down, which means more people don't have money to spend, which means it contributes to the deflation, which means businesses have even less money to bring in to support the employment base, so it becomes a self-reinforcing spiral over the course of time. I do anticipate that that is ultimately what's going to happen. The inflation might lead to the deflation, because if prices get high enough that people have to cut back based on that, then that results, what it boils down to is it results in the same amount of money being spent but on fewer goods, so there will end up being businesses that end up with less revenue as a result. And if that goes on for long enough, they will have no choice but to lower their prices to try to attract customers. Unfortunately, in an environment like that, that doesn't really work very well, and so as time goes on, it will become a self-reinforcing spiral. Which leads me to the final, for now, bigger picture point. I noted earlier that in order to keep an economy going longer term, because things are cyclical, okay, in order to pull that off, it requires ever greater deficit spending along the way. Okay, this includes by the government. It's actually especially true of the government, and especially true in a democracy, because what ends up happening is that as there is more and more economic difficulty or evidence of economic difficulty, the government has a tendency to spend more and more money in an effort to try to keep things going, to prop things up. Okay? The problem is that, in particular, if the central bank is putting out its money as borrowed money on top of it, that really emphasizes the deficit spending issue, but the reality is that as time goes on, deficit spending ends up becoming necessary in order to do what they're doing, and what the reason why they're doing it that way is because they hope that things will turn around again and they can get it going in the other direction again as time goes on. The problem is that hope doesn't manifest itself. Okay, so they deficit spend, and then they deficit spend more, and then they deficit spend more, and then they deficit spend more, etc., in the hope that it'll eventually turn around and they can go back in the other direction again. But since that's not how things work in reality, since that's not how the real world actually works, as there's plenty enough demonstrated enough in the meantime just based on more or less recent history, what ends up happening is the deficit spending goes up and up and up and up and up over the course of time, and so does the total accumulated amount of debt over the course of time. To say that in simpler terms, in shorter terms I should say, some people might not regard it as simpler, it puts the debt on an exponential track. Okay? Now, an exponential track, by the very nature of how it works, by the very nature of how the math of an exponential works, it goes up very slowly for a long time, but at ever increasing speed, but eventually it goes through the knee of the exponential, okay, and once it's past the knee, it's going up pretty fast and then very fast, okay. I realized a long time ago that the national debt of the United States was, and still is, in the meantime, on an exponential track, okay. The basic problem in the meantime being that the combination of President Trump's and President Biden's stimulus package, every penny of both of which was borrowed money that was immediately added to the national debt, and yes, I verified that at the time by looking at the debt clock and see whether it was going up accordingly, and it did, the online debt clock, which I verified the accuracy of many times over the years already, okay. The combination of President Trump's and President Biden's stimulus packages put us past the knee of the exponential. Now I knew to begin with we were getting close, okay? But when they announced the stimulus package, which by definition were going to be every penny borrowed money because we were already running huge ongoing deficits to begin with, that was going to be on top of that, that pretty much guaranteed that we were going to go through the knee of the exponential sooner rather than later. And we did. Okay, the national debt is now compounding on itself at quite a tremendous rate. Okay, and it will continue to do so, and it'll continue to get worse. It's been going faster and 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 faster over the years. Fairly slow years ago, not anymore. Okay, I saw that coming a long time ago already, just didn't know the exact timing, but we are there. It's a very large exponential. This doesn't mean the consequences are going to hit tomorrow or the next day, as of the day I'm doing this recording. Okay, but what it does mean is that the national debt, since our monthly deficits, even now that the stimulus stuff is over with, the explicit stimulus stuff is over with, since the monthly national deficits are still quite large, the monthly ones are now as big as the annual ones used to be years ago, okay, we are still thoroughly contributing to making this thing go up, although it would actually go up just fine on its own in the meantime, even if we weren't deficit spending anymore, because it's feeding on itself so thoroughly in the meantime, which it has been doing for quite a while already. It didn't start feeding on itself recently. It's been doing that for a long time, but now it's doing so very rapidly. Okay, which means that in the not too distant future, one can't specify a specific date because the deficits are based on the budget, and the budget consists of both income and expenses, both of which are variable. They both go up and down. Okay, and fairly, not just on a long-term basis. They go up and down on a short-term basis too. So depending on how the monthly deficits work out along the way, okay, and how much more stimulus they decide to do down the road too, based on how the economy is doing at any given time, that will impact whether it goes truly exponential, truly vertical, sooner or later. Okay, in the big picture, in the meantime, it'll be sooner, but how much sooner will be determined by what I just talked about. So until we get just shy of it, it'll be pretty darn hard to tell more or less exactly when it'll go vertical. I am looking at it, and I'm hoping to be able to spot it more or less in real time. What I do know at this point is it's going up fast enough as of the date of this recording that it won't take really long anymore for the national debt to start going up really fast on its own. Okay, that won't mean true exponential yet. That'll be a ways off even after that, but it's going to start going up very quickly pretty soon. It's more or less right on the verge of it in the meantime. Okay, and not long in the big picture, not long after it starts going up very quickly, it'll be going more or less vertical. The bottom line is that at that point, the national debt will be going up very quickly, and ultimately, no later than when the national debt actually goes exponential, the United States national government will be bankrupt, with all the attendant consequences of that. Now, one more point here, that's going to be the other side of the coin, and I might mention one other thing too, while I'm at it, because it has been happening recently too, that market interest rates have been going up more and more and more. I commented on that earlier, okay, but it ties in with this because in terms of how it's going to happen in the future. For now it's a stair-step fashion. They go up a ways, they come back down some. They go up a ways, they come back down some. They go up a ways, they come down some, etc. Go up a days, come down some more. And then, but every high is higher than the previous one. We have gotten as high as 3.2% in the meantime on the 10-year Treasury note, which is the overall benchmark, and mortgage rates, last time I looked, were above 5% in the meantime. Okay, that's quite a hike from where they were not that long ago. Okay, the point is that the national debt consists of government bonds, okay, of various maturities. Okay, but the point is that on any bond, whether it be government bond or corporate bond. The interest rate you owe on it is directly proportional to the value of the bond. It's a mathematical relationship. It's not one-to-one, but it is a mathematical relationship. In other words, bonds up, interest rates down, interest rates up, bonds down. Okay. The one follows directly from the other. Okay. And so what I'm saying is that, and bonds have been going down as interest rates have been going up lately. Okay. But what I'm saying is, in terms of the future, when the national debt goes exponential, that by definition means that bonds are going to crash, government bonds first of all, but probably corporate bonds in sympathy with that, because of what it'll do to the economy based on what I'm about to say. Okay, what I was going to say there a moment ago until I realized I should probably mention this quickly first, because it does all tie together in the end, and it's quickly explained, this part of it anyway. When the national debt goes exponential, okay, that means the value of the bonds will be collapsing. If the value of the bonds is collapsing, by definition, by the nature of the situation, inherently, interest rates will be skyrocketing upwards. No way around that. It's a mathematical relationship. In other words, by the time that's done, the interest rates will be sky high. Okay? Something that will have to be dealt with at the time. Part of what I'm looking at for the future is doing that in a meaningful and positive context. Probably not from within the system. That probably won't work very well. So, other side of the coin, on the stock market side, part of the reason why I'm doing this video now when I'm doing it, I've talked about how the trend was already down. It still is down, okay? That got reinforced by what happened today, okay, as I talked about earlier. At some point along the way, what I'm about to say is not a mathematical correlation, it's a psychological correlation. It depends on when the Wall Street traders figure out and realize what's really going on, okay, realize the full impact of it and that it can't be gotten around anymore, okay, and then react accordingly. I can assure you they're not there yet, okay. All the evidence is there that they're not there yet. What I'm driving at is that the national debt doesn't even have to go fully exponential. It doesn't even need to go fully exponential. Once it goes up fast enough that it becomes clear to the Wall Street traders that the national debt is going to very quickly rocket a lot higher, and they realize the implications of that and the fact that there's no way around that anymore. Once you've gotten that point, there's no way out from under anymore, within the context of the system at least, but they are part of the system, okay, they will suddenly realize that the national debt going exponential will almost certainly result in a big hit to the conventional economy. And since the Wall Street traders are ultimately all about making money and protecting their profits, once they have that realization, whenever that happens, and I can't predict ahead of time with all the pushing the system is doing to keep things going this time around, I can't predict either exactly when that'll happen. I'll know it when I'll see it. I'll be able to say when the time comes, yes, we are there, it's happening now, as a confirmation of a continuation of the earlier timeline, the timeline that I was talking about earlier, okay, the process that I was talking about earlier, but I won't be able to predict ahead of time when this happens, okay, because I don't know when they'll have that recognition. But the bottom line is that when they have this recognition, I fully expect them to more or less instantly go into panic mode and start selling like crazy. In other words, interest rates up, bonds down, national debt screaming upwards, and stock market down in no uncertain terms, crashing. Okay, the big problem is that under those circumstances, in that environment, it is extremely unlikely that the Federal Reserve, or anyone else for that matter, is going to be able to convince the traders to jump back in again afterwards, unlike what happened in the early 2000s and in early 2009 after the 2008 crash, when the Fed and the government did convince them to jump back in, and it kept things going as a result in the conventional system. under the conditions, under the circumstances of the national debt going exponential, there's going to be, once the traders fully realize what the implications of that are, and they will become obvious to them, I'm sure of that, you know, it'll be a mathematical correlation in that sense. Okay, they will at some point fully realize what's going on and what they're up against if they keep their money in the system. Okay, and I fully expect them to panic out at that point as best they can. The details of that I'm not going to get into it here. To suffice it to say, I think there'll be a big enough panic that it'll be difficult to even get all the money out successfully, quickly enough. Okay, probably a separate video to discuss the mechanics of that. Okay, I think. If I do so at all, okay, you know, the bottom line is the money is going to come out. It's either going to come out or it's going to disappear. It's not going to stay there because the stocks are going to be going down like crazy. And given what's going to be going on in the overall system at the time, it's unlikely the stock market will come back up again afterwards in reaction to that. And you know, afterwards in the consequence of that. Okay, the stocks will probably stay down next time. That will not be good for the situation. That is once the national debt goes exponential and stocks crash and stay down, what I'm saying is that is a thoroughly deflationary environment because of how people are probably going to react to it, at least within the conventional system. Okay, my aim and thoughts are in an alternate direction because I don't think it's going to hold up very well for the reasons I just talked about. We'll have to see how well that goes at a time, but that's what I foresee for the conventional system once we get there. It's not there yet, and it's not going to happen in the immediate near-term future either. Okay, we're not that far along yet. It's possible something else will come along to spook the traders, and I've thought all along that it'll probably happen, and I'm still rather convinced it will, that something else will come along to spook the traders out of the market before we hit the point where the national debt's actually going exponential on its own. But if that doesn't happen, that's the latest it can happen. When the national debt starts really going exponential, they will get very scared very quickly, okay? Because their money will be thoroughly and directly and immediately on the line. One other quick comment in that regard. It's an extension of what I just said a few minutes ago, but just to make it explicitly apparent here so one doesn't have to think about it too much, that part of it. If something else starts bringing things down first, which still seems like a very distinct possibility with the way things are going these days, and either the stock market starts going down in response to that pretty soon, or they introduce additional stimulus package to bring the other side of the coin more out of whack, okay, that will cause deficits to go up again and income to go down again, just like it did for the big illness situation starting a couple of years ago, which will be added to the national debt as well, just like the stimulus package of the last couple of years or so were added to the debt immediately. And if that additional debt gets added to the national debt, that will once again accelerate the exponential. In other words, if things go down before it can go exponential on its own, based on a compounding effect along the way, the national debt exponential will be accelerated, and it will, if that situation holds up long enough, it'll get accelerated enough that it'll go exponential in direct result, direct consequence of that. But that is just an issue of timing, I want to emphasize. If what I just talked about doesn't happen, the national debt will go exponential anyway. It'll just take longer, okay? So keep that in mind in terms of your thinking about the situation and in terms of the planning, okay? And I'll keep track of things. I've been doing it for a long time already, okay? Just haven't been making videos about it, okay, until recently. I'll be keeping track of it, and I'll be doing videos to keep up with it, to make known what's going on more or less at the detail level. And we'll just have to see how things transpire, you know, exactly how things transpire and how long it takes, and go from there. Anyway, that's enough for now.